So this is a review of the 1973 album Down the Road by Manassas. Some brief history before we get into that. Manassas was formed in autumn of 71. This was followed Steele's concert tour to support his solo album Steve Steele's 2, which was released in 71. It was the band then went on to make their debut album, and it was the first completed work since the breakup of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. And it all started really with a sort of chance meeting with the Flying Burrito Brothers singer and multi-instrumentalist Chris Hillman in Cleveland, where Stills was on tour, and they crossed paths at that time, and there was some sort of debate about getting together, and anyway, Stills persuaded Hillman to leave the Burritos, who were heading for the exit door anyway, and he brought along guitarist Al Perkins and Byron Berlin, who played fiddle with the Burritos, and they went to Miami to jam. And Stills had invited some of his band to join in, drummer Dallas Taylor, Calvin Samuels, nicknamed Fuzzy, on bass, and Paul Harris on keyboards, plus Joe Lala, who stepped in with the percussion and additional vocals. And they gelled together, and things went really well, and they subsequently released their debut album, which was a double album. And they also had some assistance along the way from one Bill Wyman, the bass player with the Rolling Stones, who actually appeared on the album. And that was how this band was formed. Now, the debut album, which I will review, was critically acclaimed, and it is a superb piece of work. And as I say, I will look at that in a subsequent review. But I am actually reviewing their follow-up, and at the time that the Down the Road sessions got underway, things were starting to fall apart a little, this was a consequence, really, of band members getting involved in different projects. Hillman started to have some time with J.D. Souther and Richie Fury, and they eventually formed a band and released an album. Dallas Taylor was battling heroin addiction, and even though Stills paid for his trip to rehab, it proved pretty unsuccessful. Fuzzy Samuels left, and Kenny Passarella, who was the bass player with Joe Walsh's band, stepped in. And so all in all, it wasn't ideal territory for the recording of the second album, Down the Road. But that's the album that I'm now going to review. And so let's get on with it. So the opening cut then is Isn't It About Time? There's some shimmering, stunning slide guitar on this track by guest Joe Walsh, and the full band sound with that distinctive Latino rhythm comes to the fore, maracas and all, and Steele's silky vocals. It's really a lovely intro. Lyrically, I think the underlying message is about the politics of America and its impact on Latin Americans, and how many times a day maybe a reference to wood and trees being cut down in the Amazon rainforest. That's my take on it anyway. To track 2, which is a Hillman song, Lies, Hillman on vocals, but the thing about this track is the twin guitars that was very much apparent with this band, I believe the slide guitar here was Stills, but it's like electricity pulsing through your veins. A very appealing song. It's a simple story of a woman's lies to her lover, and then subsequently she follows a similar pattern to a friend of who's consumed with her charm, and the friend is trying to give some advice to not tread down the same path and get rejected like he did. So to track 3 then, Pensamiento. It's a Spanish led song with Steve Stills on vocals, very Latino. It's a peach of a sound really, and there's some lovely flute touches mid-session, some crisp keyboards and percussion, and a nice pedal steel guitar used sparingly by Perkins. And there's also a cute spoken word narrative in Spanish as well. Lyrically, I got the translation. It's a plea for forgiveness for one's poor behaviour and asking for another chance. Track 4, So Many Times, segues in from track 3. It's a slow country ballad with some great mandolin from Hillman, and again Perkins steps up on pedal steel guitar, which is always a delight to hear. Nice harmonies as well in the chorus, and Hillman takes most of the lead vocals. Lyrically, it seems to be a life message about trying to get your act together, trying to get a teacher to advise you as to how to handle adult relationships with the opposite sex, so that you aren't vulnerable and you aren't subject to the whims of the emotions. It's quite dark actually, but very well sang by Hillman. So to track 5 then, Business on the Street. It's a standard sort of rock track with some more neat slide guitar from Stills, gruff sort of vocals, but I do like Stills' guitar sound. It's always been a great appeal to me. There's some stirring piano work here. Lyrically, I think it's in trying to suggest that two things really: keep your private life and your business life separate, and with regard to show business, share the load. All this solo sort of work and responsibility can get a bit tough, and if you have other members around you who can take on some responsibility, that's sorely a good thing. And of course it very much reflected what was happening in Manassas, because in the early days it was Steve's band, and Steve funded the band, and it became very costly, particularly with folk like Taylor needing rehab, which was funded by Steve, and also paying the band when they weren't active. So quite a message there about getting your business activities sorted out, and don't get too carried away with personal feelings, because it can get you into financial trouble. Side 2 opener then, it's Do You Remember the Americans, and this is a real typical country rock music song. Banjo, pedal steel guitar, real catchy rhythm. Got a Wild West feel to me, but it's real hoedown stuff, and there's a neat country picking acoustic guitar thrown in for good measure. Very reminiscent of songs on that first Eagles album. But lyrically, it's a song about the yesteryear being a handful of years before, when as a young sort of long-haired hippie type character you could travel the breadth and the width of the States, just with your thumb out because of the generosity. And the song now points out that 4 years after Vietnam, 4 years after serving in Vietnam, after being in Vietnam, the mood changed radically in the country. People were then more suspicious. Fear had replaced that generosity in the American spirit. Next up is the title track. Starts off with a real punchy blues beat with that slide guitar and Steve's country influenced vocals, a bit honky. There's a nice hint of harmonies, but it's just too far back in the mix. I'd have liked it further forward. Taylor's muddy drum sound is also particularly significant here, and then really a great solo from Steve in the middle. Lyrically, it's about leaving home after a death, maybe as a youngster, and stumbling into vices on the way: hard drugs, alcohol, religious cults, both traditional and unorthodox, and just managing to escape. Next up is City Junkies. Storming, strong piano intro leads into a very forceful rock rhythm. This is pretty strong rock music with that touch of class. The band are really in the groove here, and both guitars shine at different moments, and Stephen's vocals particularly strong. Lyrically, it's about how young people get drawn to the city, the grass is greener, etc., and how those that remain have to say goodbye to best friends and adolescent loves, and in this case the draw is New York City. Next up is another Latino song, Guanguango de Vera. I'm not sure about my pronunciation there, but it's another terrific Latino-driven percussion fest with the chorus in Spanish, Steve taking lead vocals in English. Joe Lala is mesmerising here in tandem with the piano, and the chorus is just silky, dreamy and terribly Latino, and there's a really great acoustic guitar on the outro. Lyrics, it's about love, it's about being hurt as a teenager, it's about them putting the protective wall in front of you as you move into early adulthood. Your feelings are more guarded, and then you'll wait that special feeling again as it's reborn as you open up again. And here it's related that this happens in the most romantic city in the world, Paris. Where else? Great song. So to the final track offering on this album then, Rolling My Stone. It's the longest track on the album, and it's probably the best. If you like wah-wah guitar, blues style, then this is for you. Steve Stills performs a tremendous list of expertise as he takes you up and down the fretboard delicately with the wah-wah constantly being used. I find it absolutely magical, and there's a nice chorus as well, nice melody in the vocals, and it was also partly written by Fuzzy Samuel, and the bass drives the song quite significantly. There's a second guitar in there briefly, but it's really all about the man, the master. He is an awesome guitar picker, that's for sure. He's not heavy like Hendrix or like some of the others. He's a picker, and he really uses his expertise here, and I really love it. Lyrically, I think it's a song about using dope. There's a reference to Mary Jane, which of course is the conventional way of saying marijuana, and the lyrics refer to a girl who's probably stuck inside the drug, and the man, I assume Stills, has managed to escape and can see how his stone was rolling into chaos, and it's a sort of a message of trying to escape, to get your head round life's reality. So this marriage between rock and roll and country lasted for about 18 months, but this was the last recorded material by Manassas. After this, things fell apart, and Stills tried another reunion with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and the rest of the band. Hillman, well, he was entrenched in his new offering with Souther and Fury, and but particularly the first album, but to some extent this album as well, probably the best work of Stephen Stills' career, certainly since the Buffalo Springfield, and it was all very, very nourishing while it lasted. If you haven't checked out the first album, I really do suggest you do. It is 4 sides, one side devoted to one style, and so there's a sort of blues style, there's a Latino style, there's a country style, and the 4th style is more of a rock mix with Latin flavours. But anyway, that's the end of my review to Down the Road by Manassas, released in 1973.